Okay, did you know that your morning cup of joe has a history that spans centuries and continents?
That's right. Yeah, watch as celebrity historian Raffi Andonian breaks down a little bit of the history of coffee for International and National Coffee Day, which are both coming up. Check it out. Well, grab a cup of joe for National Coffee Day or International Coffee Day or both and join in the conversation about the turbulent and social history of coffee by our friend celebrity historian Raffi Andonian, who always gives us a morning jolt.
Yeah, I feel like instead of a cup of joe, it should be a cup of Raffi because his face is on this mug.
Raffi Coffee.
Raffi Coffee.
That's right. That's actually how I tell people to remember my name. It rhymes with coffee.
Raffi Coffee. I love it. So why do we meet over a cup of coffee? Why is that a thing?
Yeah.
It's been a social thing for centuries. So think about like the 16th and 17th century especially, and it's true across cultures. So for example, the Ottomans, believe it or not, it was such a social alternative to, for example, drinking, that it was banned at some point. Coffee houses were banned because there was a problem of being kind of too democratic, if you will, for the ruling Ottomans, right? You can go over to Germany in the same time period, and similarly, in part to protect beer interests. So there was wanting to, protect the beer industry, and coffee was seen as competition. So at one point, coffee is actually not only regulated to go through the crown, but people were going around, regulators are going around sniffing for coffee to make sure that there isn't any illegal coffee activity going on. There was actually beer soup being promoted as a health food instead of coffee.
Interesting.
Oh, boy.
Hey, I'm all about some beer soup.
If they smelled my breath, they would clock me immediately.
That's right. They would clock me immediately.
Sipping coffee.
But where we draw our coffee culture from, I would go over to England in this kind of going around empires that we're doing. In England, you have coffee houses that pop up in the 16th and 17th century that are, a challenge, if you will, again, to these sort of, ruling sort of stories. And here's a funny example of that. King Charles II is concerned about coffee houses. At one point tries banning them because of the concern over spreading false news. That's the term that they use, spreading false news. So the term fake news today is not actually new. That's been centuries that they were concerned. And the reason is at the coffee houses, you have people gathering, sharing newspapers, stories, rumors, all kinds of things. And that can really lead to potentially fake news or potentially news that maybe the king doesn't like so much, especially in that time period. There's a lot of turbulence in England.
Right.
At some point, there's King Charles, of course, gets beheaded. So there's reason to be concerned.
Now, what about in the U.S.? How did coffee become so popular here?
Well, so in England, right, you have coffee there, obviously, and we draw from England. But here, where coffee really takes off and surpasses tea is during the American Revolution, because you're going to be a good patriot that, for example, think about the Boston Tea Party, right? You're tossing tea into the sea. Tea is English. We don't want that stuff when we separate. So we want to continue that coffee house culture that was a subculture in England, and it becomes our mainstream culture as a result. Now, you think about in the Revolution, for example, in Williamsburg, Virginia, when the Stamp Act happens and the Stamp Act crisis, Patrick Henry, they're reading some of this stuff, the rebellious stuff, off the porch of a coffee house in Williamsburg, Virginia. So coffee house has become seen as an alternative to the pub and the tavern where you're going to drink coffee. You go and have a nice philosophical conversation. You exchange news like we talked about earlier. And so that becomes a really important information hub in the Revolution and continues on into American history. In the Civil War, a couple generations later, coffee was a key part of the rations that Civil War soldiers got. Think about it. You're marching 30 miles a day, sometimes 40 miles a day if you have to. I mean, coffee really helps you out. Out west, when for gold mines and things like that, that's really going to help out too. Folger, for example, the Folgers coffee was one of the guys that started coffee in California during the gold rush. So this is stuff that really is ingrained into American history in a variety of ways.
Yeah, and one question before you go, quickly, if you can answer this one. Where did coffee originate, Raffi?
It originates in East Africa. Originally, the plant is actually kind of a fruity plant, believe it or not, and it comes up to Arabia, which is where you have the first time roasting the coffee. Think about like Arabic coffee, right? Yeah. That's where it originates, where we think about it about 700 years ago, 700 plus years ago, and then kind of spreads over from there. Eventually, during colonization, you have some of the other European powers that now have access to places where they can grow coffee, right? Think about Central and South America. So that's how it spreads over to the Americas. So that's why, like Colombian coffee, for example. But originates in the old world, comes through across the ocean.
That's great
history.
That's so cool.
Thank
you for joining us and and sharing that and sharing a cup of Joe with us.
With your face on it.
Raffi history in that cup. And patriotism.
That's right. Yes.
Maybe if we drink this, we'll be as energetic as Raffi.
So.
All right. Stay with us. We've got more Good Day in WA coming right up.
Yeah.